Really, Putin? The Taliban. That's who Russia has chosen as its next strategic partner. We're not even going to tease this one because Putin's latest decision is so ludicrous that it's almost unbelievable. But it's true. This is desperation manifested. First it was North Korea, now it's the Taliban. Just how much lower can Russia go as Putin desperately scrapes through the bottom of the barrel and into the dirt as it looks for allies? Okay, so let's look at the deal. On May 28th, Politico reported that Russia and Afghanistan have signed a military cooperation agreement, which was drafted about a year after Russia became one of the first few nations to recognize the supposed legitimacy of the Taliban government that installed itself in the country. The Taliban is no longer a terrorist group, Russia claims. It operates a real government, and one with which Russia wants to build closer ties. How close is the question? Though both Russia and the Taliban have been quick to reveal that a deal exists, neither is saying much about what it actually means. Even at the International Security Forum in Moscow, the Afghan Defense Minister, Mohammad Yaqub, kept things as vague as possible. Interaction with Russia is important for us. Afghanistan and Russia have had long-standing and historic relations. We want to move forward in this direction, Yaqub said in a complete non-statement. Russia's Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu didn't offer much more, stating, "We are convinced that Western countries must unfreeze frozen Afghanistan assets, fully acknowledge their full responsibility for the 20-year presence in Afghanistan, and assume the entire burden of the post-conflict reconstruction of the country." So we have something of a reason for all of this. Russia wants to take a shot at the West. But as for the deal itself, all that we really know is that it's some sort of military technical cooperation agreement, and that neither side has released the text of the document that they have signed. Without that text, it's difficult to gauge just how deep this new deal goes, though we can speculate. Typically, a military technical agreement can cover a range of activities, up to and including the transfer of weapons, logistical support, troop training, and other types of assistance. But that in itself is a bit of a problem. It's not like Russia's coffers are overflowing right now. Russia's economy is in crisis mode to the point where Swedish intelligence reports that the country has been faking its economic data to appear more economically powerful than it really is. A larger budget deficit and higher inflation than claimed is what the Swedes say Russia is dealing with, so it's not like Russia has the money to support the Taliban. It also can't provide weapons to strengthen Afghanistan's regime, as Putin needs those weapons for his failing campaign in Ukraine. So what is this really all about for Russia? Putin wants this to be a political signal to the West, and we see that in Shoigu's statement. Ruslan Suleimanov, who is an expert with the NEST Center, tells Russian independent outlet The Insider that any sort of serious military cooperation is likely off the table. Rather, this is a symbolic measure to show that Moscow isn't abandoning the Taliban alone, that this cooperation isn't just words but deeds. But in reality, there definitely won't be any kind of military alliance or coalition like with North Korea, Suleimanov claims. The Independent reports something similar, noting that Shoigu claimed that Russia believes that the creation of US and NATO military structures and facilities in Afghanistan or neighboring states is unacceptable, which implies that Russia is trying to position itself as a nation that stands up for the little guy against the big bad Western powers. What else is new, Putin? It's just that this time, the little guy is a terroristic regime that has kicked Russia's rear in the past. Putin is making his bed with fleas and he's happily lying in it. Russia has to be getting something more than thinking that it's thumbing its nose at the West out of all of this. Whatever that something might be, it certainly isn't weapons. The Taliban doesn't have much of anything that it could send to Russia to help Putin in his war against Ukraine. As Global Firepower points out, the military that the Taliban has created in Afghanistan relies almost exclusively on small arms. The Taliban doesn't have a navy, so it's not using warships to support Russia. Afghanistan has a grand total of 5 aircraft, amounting to a pair of transports and a trio of choppers, so air power is out. Tanks are also out. The Taliban has none of those. The same goes for artillery, Global Firepower says, meaning that all the Taliban might have to offer is meat and a handful of the 3,902 vehicles that its army possesses when it comes to conventional equipment. The Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance notes the Taliban does have some access to missiles, though these are mostly Stingers, Scud-B and SA-24 Igla-S left over from the old Soviet and US campaigns in Afghanistan. RAND estimated that 4,500 of this type of equipment were left behind in those two conflicts, but the odds are high that much of it is either used, poorly maintained, or too vital to the Taliban to be sent to Russia. The Taliban has also started to show signs that it's using drones for kamikaze attacks, but it seems unlikely that there is much that the group could do or provide for Russia on the drone front that Russia doesn't already have. Frankly, it's the Taliban that seems to be getting the better part of this deal. As Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty points out, just as Russia doesn't have much cash or equipment to send the Taliban's way, The Afghan regime hardly has a war chest that it can use to purchase anything from Russia. The 4.3% gross domestic product or GDP growth seen in Afghanistan in 2025 is illusory, as it was driven by citizens returning to the country from Pakistan and Iran. Over 2 million Afghans returning home meant that the nation's GDP projected declined by an estimated 4%, World Bank reports. But with this deal, the Taliban gains some legitimacy as a geopolitical entity. Not much. It's still the Taliban, and the group is on the terrorist list for most countries, but now it can claim to have Russia as an ally, not just in trade, but militarily. Coming back to Russia, there is at least some element of an attempt to preserve its strength in the Central Asian and Far Eastern sections of Russia. In particular, Russia is looking for a counterweight country to the Islamic State Khorasan, which claimed responsibility for a devastating terrorist attack at a concert venue in Moscow that claimed the lives of almost 150 people back in March 2024. That group is still active inside Russia, so it seems that the logic might be that Putin is cozying up to one group of terrorists to help him tackle another group. Plus, there's the influence factor. Now that the US has withdrawn from Afghanistan, Russia is trying to swoop into the region and pick up the pieces. Again, it all seems so meager. The only other possible reason why Russia might want to make a deal like this is that Putin believes he might be able to extract some manpower out of the Taliban that he can send to die on the front lines in Ukraine. He's done that before with other countries. North Korea sent up to 15,000 soldiers to Russia between the fall of 2024 and the end of 2025, the Council on Foreign Relations reports. However, the Taliban isn't much more powerful on the manpower front than it is on its embarrassing equipment front. Afghanistan has 75,000 active personnel in its military and another 90,000 paramilitary forces, most of which are needed to help the Taliban maintain its grip on power. That's how military-backed dictatorships work. You can't keep them going if you're sending your best fighters to go and die in another country. Plus, as Alexei Zakharov, who is a fellow with the India-based Observer Research Foundation, tells The Independent, the Taliban isn't overseeing a stable version of Afghanistan. The Taliban is currently struggling with rising instability in Afghan northern provinces and cannot fully protect the southern border with Pakistan, Zakharov notes, as he points out that Russia isn't likely to trade the sophisticated weapons it sent to North Korea to convince the Taliban to send soldiers. So we come back to what this deal is really about. It can be summed up in one word: desperation. Russia has signed a deal with the Taliban because it can't sign similar deals elsewhere. This is really a story about Putin's waning geopolitical influence and what it's doing to Russia, and we're going to explain precisely why soon. Before we do, this is why we make the military show, to explain how power really moves, or in this case, how it barely moves at all. If you're enjoying this video, make sure you subscribe so you catch what we have coming next. Let's start with the obvious. Russia has just run into the arms of an old enemy. Of course, changing geopolitical relationships are nothing new. Old enemies become friends and vice versa, often throughout the course of history. But what we're seeing in this deal between Russia and the Taliban is a Russian president who wants to return his country to the glory days of the old Soviet Union by forming a relationship with an organization that the Soviet Union tried to destroy throughout the 1980s. The decade-long war between Afghanistan and the Soviet Union cost Russia 15,000 soldiers. For any other nation, that would be a humiliation large enough to dissuade it from cutting a deal like the one Russia just made with the Taliban. But for Putin, 15,000 casualties is less than half of what Russia experiences in a month in Ukraine right now. So perhaps that makes it easier for him to let bygones be bygones. Still, they humiliated Russia in a way that wouldn't be topped until Putin's catastrophic campaign in Ukraine. The fact that Russia's leader is now so readily signing and touting defense deals with this particular group is a sign of just how far Russia has fallen in the geopolitical landscape. Right now, Russia is basically saying yes to any government, no matter how tenuous that will take it. North Korea was bad enough. The cooperative defense treaty that Russia signed with North Korea back in 2024 left people wondering just how deep into the barrel Putin would look for allies. Kim Jong-un and his isolated government repaid Russia for the technology and cash it sent with the soldiers we mentioned earlier. But Putin established himself as a man who'll make a deal with the devil if it means that there's a better chance of him winning his war in Ukraine. But at least North Korea could provide something. Soldiers, rockets, and military equipment have all come from Pyongyang both before and after the 2024 deal was signed. Even as recently as December 2025, Kim Jong-un confirmed that North Korean troops were still operating in Russia, where they're apparently being tasked with clearing mines in the Kursk region. But Russia isn't going to get anything like that from the Taliban. There is no real quid pro quo here, no exchange of money and tech for troops and equipment. Just a deal that tells us that Putin recognizes that he has nowhere left to turn. This isn't really about sticking it to the US, and it certainly isn't about the Taliban helping Russia to defeat Ukraine. What we see in this deal is the last dying gasp of a Russian leader who has seen his global influence collapse from under him. The last few years haven't been kind to Putin when it comes to his desire to create a new world order with Russia at the center. Whenever Putin supports a regime these days, that regime seems to collapse. We saw it in Syria towards the end of 2024. The fall of the Assad regime led to Russia losing a ton of prestige, as the weapons and support that Moscow had provided to that regime did the sum total of nothing to stop a rebellion that eventually led to Bashar al-Assad running for his life. In Venezuela, Putin was making an ally out of dictator Nicolas Maduro. Russian relations with Venezuela reached new heights following the invasion of Ukraine, the Center for European Policy Analysis notes, even leading to the signing of a decade-long partnership agreement. All of that collapsed into dust when the US extracted Maduro from the country he ruled, leaving Putin without a key ally in South America. And after Operation Epic Fury claimed the life of former Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei within the first 24 hours, Putin must have been left wondering where he could turn next. All of Russia's allies were being taken out of the equation. That leaves Putin with North Korea and now the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's hardly a murderer's row of geopolitical influence, no matter how hard Russia tries to claim that it is. Putin's lack of global leverage had already been exposed. Now the gaping wound of Russia's failure is on full display for the entire world to see as Russia inks a deal with the Taliban. And as Putin has proven in all of the instances of his alliances collapsing, Russia seems to be able to do nothing about its failing influence beyond spouting rhetoric. There have been no real attempts to restore regimes that are friendly to Russia in Syria, Venezuela, or Iran. Russia simply doesn't have that kind of clout anymore. A fragmenting regional order can now only be bolstered by getting into bed with the types of regimes that have opposed Russia in the past. That isn't diplomacy. It's the desperation of a leader who knows that the clock is ticking on his reign. But what about China, you might ask? That's a major ally on which Putin can hang his hat. Well, sort of. It's certainly true that China has provided Russia with dual-use components that often find their way into weapons and drones that Russia uses in Ukraine. It's also true that China is the world's largest buyer of Russian oil, which keeps money pouring into Putin's war chest. But Xi Jinping isn't the ally that Putin wants him to be. China hasn't signed anything like the defense deals with Russia that are now being signed with the Taliban. And it's not like Putin can just snap his fingers and get what he needs from China. We saw that during the diplomatic visit that Putin made to Beijing in May. While that visit led to the signing of over 20 agreements on tech and trade, the BBC reports, it also ended without any signs of the gas pipeline that Putin wants to link Russia and China coming any closer to being achieved. The reality that Putin has to accept is that China doesn't really see Russia as an ally. Beijing views Moscow as a tool that can be used for cheap oil and geopolitical wrangling. Tools are discarded when they're no longer of any use. Putin knows that Xi holds all of the power in Russia's relationship with China, and Xi could very easily pull the plug without any real ill effects if Putin does something to anger him. That entire relationship is on China's terms, as Russia makes up just 4% of China's international trade, despite Beijing being absolutely critical to Putin's plans. China can survive, and likely even thrive, without Russia. The same can't be said the other way around. The best that Russia has among the major players is a one-sided relationship and a bunch of leadership collapses, hence the deal with the Taliban. If it wasn't humiliating enough for Putin that he has been forced to dive so deep to find an ally, Russia's latest deal also comes as Ukraine is turning itself into a power player in the Middle East. As Russia tries to make moves to protect itself in Central Asia, Ukraine is signing decade-long defense deals with the likes of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And Ukraine is actually getting something out of those deals. The Gulf nations that have found themselves under attack by the same types of Shahid drones that Russia is using against Ukraine are trading oil, cash, and perhaps even military equipment for Ukraine's expertise in dealing with those drones. This contrast shows you just how far Russia is falling in the global pecking order. Putin signs deals that deliver nothing to Russia just so that he can get an ally that nobody else wants. Ukraine is signing deals where it's an equal partner that is being recognized for its ability to help major nations protect themselves. These two things are not the same. All that Russia's deal with the Taliban does is deliver the sum total of nothing to Russia, while allowing the Taliban to crow about how it runs a legitimate government. Putin is in a weaker position than he has ever been before, the European Union's foreign policy head Kaja Kallas said on May 11th, and he's just proved it with this deal. Russia is begging for scraps from the geopolitical table while Ukraine has taken a seat that it was never supposed to take. The Taliban are not a serious partner for Russia. They are simply a sign that Russia has fallen so far that it may never be able to clamber up again. And we know for sure that the Taliban isn't going to be able to do anything to help Russia reverse the course that it's on in Ukraine right now. While Putin signs deals with isolated regimes, Ukraine is doing a little isolating of its own. Only that isolation is happening in occupied Crimea. Russia's vital land bridge to the Crimean Peninsula has been cut off, leaving 1.5 million Russians searching for help from their weakened leader. This is all part of Ukraine's plan to retake Crimea, and you can find out why if you watch our video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to The Military Show so you can see more of our coverage of the latest developments in geopolitics. And thank you as always for watching.